When most people approach the topic of reading unvoweled Arabic where there's no tashkeel in the books, they'll often point to a shelf of books, like the books I have behind me right here. And they'll say that eventually a student of knowledge, a student of Arabic, will want to build the skills needed in order to be able to read without vowels. Because most of these books, they don't have vowels. But anybody that approaches this topic in this way completely misses the point. So inshallah, in today's video, I'm going to explain to you exactly what the ability to read Arabic without vowels actually represents and how it is the only true benchmark for proficiency. Either you can do it or you struggle. And I'm also going to give you a few examples, and I'll explain to you the process that you can follow starting today that will allow you to be able to read unvoweled Arabic confidently in as soon as 2 months. And if you're studying part-time, then it will take about 6 months. But there is a process that needs to be followed, and there are a number of steps, and if you skip any one of those steps, you will not be able to read without vowels. In order to be able to read Arabic without vowels, the reader needs to be able to infer the vowels, because the vowels are not written in the book. You have to be able to infer the vowels. And inference is a process that assumes building blocks. Like, you gotta have the tools. So I'll give you a couple of examples. But first, let's do a little experiment. I'm going to flash a little paragraph of text, and I want you to pause the video and read it, and let me know in the comments how it went. And then I'll do it again, a second paragraph. So if you're honest, the first one was fairly easy, and you probably got through with little difficulty. Here's the second one. So you probably had a lot of difficulty trying to read the second one. Be honest, post in the comments, let me know how you did. Now, a lot of people, they use this experiment in order to prove that all you need to be able to read without vowels is to know what the words mean. If you know what the words mean, and also you have some context and some familiarity with the topic, then automatically you'll be able to read. So in other words, memorize words. Memorize words, and that just completely misses the point. And it's completely wrong, and it's a false analogy, and if anything, I would call that a scam. I would actually label that as scam. And it's a complete misrepresentation of what reading Arabic without vowels actually represents. So in this video, inshallah, I'm going to show you what it really entails and how it's the only true benchmark for proficiency, and it's something that students need to aspire to, and it's something that students need to work towards as an actual goal. Let's get into the process of how exactly is reading without vowels achieved within 2 months. So when I say 2 months, I mean if you're studying 4 or 5 hours a day, full time, 4 to 5 days a week. And the reason I can make a claim and say 2 months is because I've successfully done it for years. You see, because I've been teaching Arabic for over 20 years. And in the middle, we used to have these intensives where people would drive in from out of town. So one sister, she drove 22 hours from Mississippi to attend these classes. And she earlier studied Arabic at Harvard University. And she posted on the Al-Maghrib forums, which are no longer available. But she said something along the lines of the following. She said, because of that, I learned more in one day than I learned in an entire year of Harvard. You see, and I'll flash the screenshot here. You can pause the video, you could read it for yourself. You see, so back in those days, it was a full-time intensive where students would spend 4 hours a day of actual class, and along with the 4 hours, they'd probably be spending another 3 or 4 on their own in preparation, 4 days a week. And by the second month, we're reading without vowels. By the end of the second month. So 2 months are gone, and then the reading without vowels begins at the end of the second month. And then it continues for the rest of the 6 months. So if you translate that to part-time study, where a student is only spending maybe 5 to 7 hours a week total, and from the 5 to 7 hours, 2 of them would be the live classes, and the other 3 or 4 would be watching videos and preparing and taking notes and coming to the class. In that environment, it would take about 6 months. So what could be achieved full-time in 2 would take 6 months when you spread it over a longer period of time. But the goal is the same. So step 1 in the process is to cover the small amount of high-impact grammar and morphology that's required in order to begin reading anything. And when I say anything, I'm talking about simple books that are voweled, like the Stories of the Prophets book, like these books. So that takes about 3 hours of actual instruction, which you can spread over a number of days. So if it's full time, then you can do it in 2 days. Or if you're taking it slowly, it would take about 2.5 weeks. So by the third week, you should be beginning a book like this. So when we do a book like this, the goal is not to be able to immediately read and understand everything. No, what would happen is that the front-loaded theory would immediately come to life, and the student can see those things. And this book would then continue for weeks, for a number of weeks. So while the book is going on, the student is being exposed to the majority of grammatical scenarios and all of the phrases, the phrase level relationships. Like only two of them are taught in the beginning. The rest of them would be introduced gradually as they appear in the book. So they'll appear once, and the student and the teacher would draw attention to it, and then they'd appear a second time, a third time, and there's no memorization at all. None of these rules ever need to be memorized. Every principle and rule that's taught, it's taught because it's needed in order to appreciate the sentence we have in front of us, because there's a degree of complexity there, you see, and something new, some new element. The author has chosen to bring a new element. So like when we see sentences describing nouns, then sometimes there's a relative pronoun and sometimes there's no relative pronoun. So we'll speak about that. We'll speak about the wisdom, and we'll frame it as a solution to a comprehension issue. And I've done this in some of my previous videos. You see, so at some point, the student will have been exposed to the majority of grammatical scenarios, and between the 12 and 16 ways in which words can connect together in phrase level relationships, they will have been exposed to all of them. And exposed to all of them. So they can see them in a book like this. And then at the 6-month period, like assuming that we're studying part-time, we would start the Hidayatul Nahu book, the grammar text, the classical grammar text, which is unvoweled. I would expose them to these tips and tricks to be able to, it's really just two things, like proper tanween placement and also the ability to detect the start and the end of sentences. So step number one in the process is to front load high impact grammar and morphology, which is needed in order to begin reading anything. And that has been done here on this channel. Okay, the most popular video on this channel is a 3-hour workshop. And at this stage right now, it's nearing 250,000 views. Previous versions of this workshop have been watched well over 1 million times. Step number two, start the book, the reading book, and expose the student to the majority of grammatical scenarios informally without a textbook. You see, and this book needs to be voweled. One thing I've seen, people have recommended that there's a version of the Stories of the Prophets book that is available online without vowels. So they would try to get the student to read that one. So I would say that's a mistake, okay, because you're not following the roadmap. You see, because the student does not have the tools yet in order to be able to infer properly. So when you remove the vowels, all you're doing is frustrating. You're not really teaching anything. You see, so inference depends on building blocks, because the goal here is for the student to be able to infer the vowels, and you got to have some basis from which to do the inference, right? So we're building that basis in this period of time. When we're doing this book, we're reinforcing existing grammar, we're teaching new grammar, and we're building all of the building blocks that would then be used in order to be able to infer correctly when we transition into reading without vowels. You see, so the book we choose to practice reading without vowels is a grammar text. You see, because we've been spending time on grammar for 6 months anyways, so we're intentionally picking a book that's low in vocabulary, because we don't want the student spending hours upon hours looking up every single word in the dictionary, because we want to teach them how to read without vowels, you see. So there's a time and place for everything. So in this phase, we choose a grammar text, you see, where everything has already been taught informally. They're getting to revisit it again in much greater detail through the grammar text. So the book we choose is Hidayatul Nahu. It could be any book. It could be one of the commentaries of Al-Ajrumiyya, and it would do just as fine. You see, and all of the instruction and the teaching should be in English. There's no reason why the teacher should be teaching in Arabic. There's no benefit, because the point is for the student to understand. So when we translate, when we read and when we translate, we're not doing it lazily. We're actually showing the student where these meanings are coming from. So if you have like a 10-word sentence and the translation is 20 words, then you got to know that this word means this, and you can see how it's being achieved and where the sentence is segmenting, and all of these elements of the sentence, they need to clearly be distinct. So when you do it in English, then the student can appreciate it. But if I just do it in Arabic, and I take the Arabic that's in the text and paraphrase it, then I'll be I'll be expressing what's in Arabic through other Arabic that sort of means the same thing, but it may be right, it may be wrong, and you have no earthly idea, and there's nothing transferable. So I'm not transferring to you any skill that you can adopt yourself. You see? So the teaching needs to be kept in English. Okay, so now we have step number 1, front load, high impact, grammar and sarf that's required in order to begin anything. Step number 2 is read with vowels and expose the student to the majority of grammatical scenarios as they're occurring naturally within the book. And then the reading without vowels begins. And by the time the Hidayat al-Nahu book is done, the student will be able to comfortably read without vowels. But it's not just by watching videos. So the student would have to prepare on their own. And this is incredibly important. You can't skip this step. The student would have to prepare the text ahead of the class. So if the class is like 2 hours, then we would expect them to spend 4 hours on preparation for the 4 or 5 pages, however many pages that are going to be covered in the class. So they go over it on their own first with the help of a dictionary, but the assumption is that you won't really need a dictionary because it's a grammar text and you already know what the words mean. Like you already know what mu'rab means and mabni means, and you know what dhamma is and fatha is, and you know what amil is, and you know what fa'il is and mubtada is and ism afkan and khabar binna. So these are terms that you already know. Every now and then there might be a word you don't know, so you just look it up. And you struggle with it. And you try to arrive at your highest possible percentage on your own. And you infer. And you try to figure it out. You don't write anything in the book because that's a bad habit. We don't write in the book. So you do it and you spend some time with the book, quality time, and then you come to the class, you put your hand up and you read aloud in front of the teacher, and the teacher will now correct you. And he'll see where you make the mistake. He'll zoom in on the source of the confusion so that you can realize and understand where the error happened, why it happened, and then you just don't make that same mistake again. And then you make another mistake the next day, and then you make another mistake. The goal is to make all of the mistakes and be corrected, and then eventually you forget all of the failures and you remember the success, and this is how proficiency is attained. This is how I did it. This is how everybody that is able to read without vowels does it. This is how it's done in the madrasa. Like we used to do it daily in the madrasa. So you need a teacher to be able that could do this, that could correct your mistakes, but not just tell you what's right and what's wrong, but actually zoom in on the source of confusion and correct the error and explain the nature of the mistake. So is it a sarf mistake? Is it a voweling? Is it a grammar error? You see, and then you also translate, and then the translation gives it away. Like, I mean, when a student is translating, I can tell immediately whether they understand the objective of the author or whether they're just guessing. You can't hide. There's no hiding. There's no hiding. So that's why I said the ability to read and comprehend books without vowels is the only true benchmark for proficiency. You see? And this is the process. I just laid it out for you here in this video. And if you want step 1, so you can now watch this video here, spread it over a number of days, inshallah, and then move on to some of the other videos on this channel. And I look forward to speaking with you soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.